All right, I think I'm wired up sufficiently. I've heard so many horror stories about these. I'm not going into detail, but I have a personal friend. I will not share any names because I know he would not want me to, but he's a Southern Baptist pastor, and he had this on and forgot about it and went to the bathroom. And of course, they tell me that the sound guy nearly killed himself trying to get to the sound booth to get the audio shut off. You can only imagine, but yeah, that's why. If you notice, I never touched the thing until I got up here. It's like, yeah, I don't know, probably. I apologize for bringing all this hardware up here, but I don't have a printer yet for this new computer, and my outline's on it. So we're just gonna, and I'm the most, I hate technology, and yet at the same time I'm totally dependent upon it. Isn't that horrible? You know, and I shouldn't be dependent on it. It's just I'm too lazy to get out a pen and pad and write anymore. That's just the honest truth. But anyhow, it's just so much easier to type the stuff up and import documents and all that other fun stuff. I was reading this morning, and it kind of went right in with what I'm going to talk about today. In Scotland, hey, there's my outline. Good deal. In Scotland, they just came out with their end-of-year report on criminal behavior. And in their end-of-year report, they referred to pedophiles as MAPS. Has anybody heard this term yet? It's a minor attracted person. And, of course, they caught some flack for it. And Scotland Yard's defense was, well, that's what the European Union uses now to designate these individuals. Now, some of y'all know, some of you may not, I worked for 20 years as a social worker. The first job I ever had in that field was at the United Methodist Children's Home in Mount Vernon, Illinois. I worked there for 2 years. 90%, and the children that we worked with was called an SED population. That means severely emotionally disturbed. And if I didn't get bit, kicked, spit on, I hadn't been to work that day. It was just how that was. 90% of our children had been sexually abused. That's why they behave that way. That's part of it. All right. They're pedophiles. Let's just call them what they are, you know. And now pedophile, there's some variations. You know, we tend to think of pedophile as someone who, you know, is attracted to folks younger than the age of 18, and that's not true. A pedophile is someone who's attracted to someone under the age of 12. They're prepubescent. Now, there are a lot of folks out there that, you know, have relationships with kids from 12 to 18. That's inappropriate. You should go to jail for that. But if you're having a relationship with a 3-year-old, in my opinion, death penalty. And I don't back up from that. Death penalty. I seen what it does. I lived in it for 20 years. I cleaned up the mess. That those horrible people made. And some of it's unfixable, folks. Only some of those children will never be made whole. Until they, you know, stand in the presence of God. They'll just never be made whole. We should never get to where we try and call something evil less than what it is. And we're beginning to do that as a society. And I mean, if you had told me even 5 years ago that we would see some of the things that we're seeing now, I would have said, no, I could see it happening at the end of my life or another generation or two, but I would have never believed that we would see what we see now. And it's, and let me say this, because I at times I get really frustrated about what I'm seeing. But there are a lot of us left in this country who find all of that offensive. And as a matter of fact, I think we're still the majority. And you know what we need to do? We need to let our voices be heard. I mean, we live in a country where we can still let our voices be heard. Fortunately, we still can. We need to let our voices be heard about that. We need to let it be heard at the voting booth. We need to let it be heard within the media. You need to let it be heard amongst your acquaintances that some of these things, they just should never be tolerated. And I'm telling you, I spent 13 years total of my life working with children in children's homes and Boys Ranch, and then several years beyond that as a community case manager, and I've seen firsthand the horrific things that have been done to kids by these people, and I'm not going to redefine it for them. I'm going to throw their evil right back in their face and hold them accountable for it. And we need to do that, and we don't need to be ashamed about doing it. There's nothing wrong or that I should be ashamed or afraid of for protecting little kids. We shouldn't feel bad about that. And I don't care if it hurts a pedophile's feelings. But I'm telling you, having seen it firsthand, having read the case plans, having read the case histories, having written the case histories, one of my jobs several years ago is I worked in a mental health unit at a women's prison here in Arkansas, the only one. Well, that's a whole nother story there, but my job was every woman in the state of Arkansas, every one of them, who got sent to the Department of Corrections, I compiled their social history. I interviewed them personally, and I wrote their social history. And when I got done writing their social histories, most of the time, I looked at their social history and said to myself, how could they not end up here? You could just see the yellow brick road that was lined for them. They were set up by parents, grandparents, teachers, whoever. They were set up to end up where they were. Now that doesn't take away personal responsibility for some of these folks because all of us have the responsibility in our life. Nobody's childhood's perfect, trust me, nobody. We all grow up in various different families, and none of them are perfect. That's just part of the human condition. But for each and every one of us, we have an option in our life when we become adults. Do I repeat the sins of the past, or do I choose another line for myself, another lane for myself, another way for myself? And for me, working in the field of social work and psychology, that's one of the things I focused on with my clients and with the children I worked with and all. Look, I get it. This is how you were raised. I understand this is what you've seen. I understand this is what was done to you or done around you. But you have a choice, and I have a choice, and everybody else has a choice. Do we do what was done, or do we find another way? And really, that's the message of Christianity, is it not? I mean, does not Apostle Paul say, I put to death my old man? Apostle Paul over and over again will say, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. the Bible tells us, whatsoever a man thinks, what? So is he. And so it took psychologists a few thousand years to figure that out. Hey, if you dwell on something, you end up becoming that. It's amazing, huh? The company that I work for, Wanzik, most of the time, hadn't worked for them for this year. It's been slow, but 2 years ago, it just kind of finally came to a head. They were having a lot of injuries. And so they assembled a team. They got some outside resources, and they're trying to figure out, why are we having all these property damage incidents, and why are all these people getting seriously hurt and sometimes killed? And of course, we build wind turbines, and there's a million nifty ways to die in one. They can drop something heavy on you. It's 300 foot tall. I mean, if you make one misstep, 300 foot, the bad thing about 300 foot, you got enough time to contemplate what's about to happen, and they had this rash of incidents and injuries. And what we used to do was and it's because OSHA says you got to give your people a day off, at least one day off every 2 weeks. So how many days off did we get? 1 day off every 2 weeks. So you'd work a whole month, and how many days off did you get in a month? 2 days. And so they brought in all these people, and they did all this research, and then the safety guys came back and they said, hey, we noticed something. People are starting to get hurt about day 8 or 10 up to about day 13. Maybe we ought to take a day a week off. Maybe Sunday would be a good day. Not much going on Sunday anyhow. So, hey, let's start giving our employees Sunday off and see if that fixes this problem. And guess what? It primarily fixed the problem. It took Wanzik several $1,000s and several consultants to figure out what God told you and I don't know, 3,000 years ago. Work 6 days and take a day off. He didn't do that because he wanted to keep you and I from making some money. He just knows that we need to heal. We need to rest. Need our mind and our bodies need a day off. A lot of these things that we brilliantly figure out, if we would follow the plan that was laid out for us, wouldn't be a problem in the first place, would it? Okay, got to yammering, and I let my computer close up on me. How do you like that? That's the other thing about it. Your notes never do that on paper. You can read them. All right. If you have your Bible, let's turn to the book of Hosea. The book of Hosea falls into a category of the Bible called the minor prophets. Now, minor prophets, it doesn't mean they're less important. It means they're shorter books. You can say a lot in a little bit of space. So, minor prophets, don't think that they're insignificant. They're very significant. By the way, how many minor prophet books are there? There's 12. Where have you heard that number before? Amazing, huh? It's kind of these numbers and stuff keep getting repeated, don't they? Here's something, and y'all may know this and you may not. What's the numerical system that you and I use? Who invented it? No, he was part of it, but who invented the actual numerical system that you and I use? It's referred to mostly as Arabic numerals. Now, and that's who we got them from. And before that, what did we use in the West? Roman numerals. Now, I don't know if I probably couldn't do long division right now if I had to. That'd be horrible. I hadn't done that since grade school. But could you imagine doing long division with Roman numerals? Lord have mercy. You'd need a sheet of paper the size of this room, just to do a basic problem. But, you don't have that with Arabic numerals, do you? You don't have all the V's and the I's and the X's and stuff. You just have a number. And the numerical system we use is, 1 through 9 and then 0. And it was actually developed by people in India, the Harappan culture, but the Indus Valley culture. And the Arabs took it or borrowed it from them. And they made some improvements upon it, and the Indus Valley culture came up with the concept of 0, which is a big concept, and the decimal point. So all of that we got from them, and we use it still to this day. Now there was another numerical system in the ancient world that the Jewish people, it came from their region. The world came from Babylon, from the Fertile Crescent area there. And it was called a sexagesmal system. And I know that sounds naughty, but it just means based on the number 60. All right? And why would you base a numerical system on 60? It doesn't make any sense to me, at least at first. But then I realized, as I read, how many numbers are divisible into 60? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't think 7 is. 8 and 9, I don't believe. 10 is, though. 12 is. 15 is. So why would that be important? And do we still use that system?
More or less.
There's a clock on the wall right there. And there's a 12. Is 12 divisible into 60? Yes, it is. How many minutes are in an hour? How many seconds are in a minute? 60. All right, so we do use that system for calculating time. There's another area we use it. What's 6 times 6? Add a 0. All right, how many points are there on a compass? 360 degrees. So we still use the numerical system that we inherited from the Babylonians. We don't know it, but we've grown up with it all of our lives, and we've used that numerical system. So numbers and all of these. And so the numerical systems that the Hebrew people used, they grew up with those, and a lot of those, you see it in the Bible. So you see numbers like 12, and then how many days are there in a week? Well, 7. And the reason that 7 was chosen, how many days are in a lunar cycle? About 28. You divide it by 4 and you get 7. And so that's kind of why we ended up with that number. So that's one of those numbers that comes on. That's just some knowledge for free. That's not part of my sermon. You can just have that. All right, so we're in the book of Hosea, first of the minor prophets. A little bit of background. The kingdom of Israel, they come out of Egypt. They operate kind of like America did. When we first got our independence, we had what was called the Articles of Confederation. We didn't have a constitution. And people lived in the book of Judges. They're just kind of loose confederation of tribes. And then finally they get a king, and they develop the unified kingdom stage, which is Saul, David, and Solomon. Upon Solomon's death, the kingdom divides, and it becomes the nation of Judah and the nation of Israel. Now, and that's important. A lot of times you and I are reading the Bible and we see Judah and Israel and we kind of think of it all as being the same. It's not. Not always. Now, they are interchangeable. Trust me, they do a lot of that too. But in this case, in the book of Hosea, when he's talking about Israel, he's talking about what's called the northern kingdom. The book of Hosea is set in an area around the mid-700s, which would be the 8th century BC. And Hosea is unique in the minor prophets in that he is the only one from Israel. The rest of them are all from Judah. But he happens to be from Israel. And his prophecies are regarding the book, or the people of Israel. And so, I look at the world that we live in today, and we've talked about it a little bit. You see some major changes. There's 2 big currents that I believe that are taking place in that. And one of them is secular humanism. And I know I've talked about that before, and if you get a chance, just type in a Humanist Manifesto and read the Humanist Manifesto number 1. There's like 3 or 4 of them now. But you will see, as you read that, you'll recognize our culture, where it's been going. That's now the Bible of our culture. We really are post-Christian America. That's the truth. Obama said that, and it just ticked me off. Made me mad. And then I got to really looking at things and realized I don't like the guy, but he's right. We do live in post-Christian America. Now, we're still a very significant part of America, but we live in post-Christian America. Well, what do I mean by that? Let me see if I can pull it up here. People who say that religion is very important in their lives, what would you say that number is for America? Yeah, percentage. Religions are very important in our lives. It's 53%, just barely over half. Now, religion, that doesn't mean Christianity, by the way. So you carve us out and the number gets pretty small. Canada, it's 27%. Mexico's 45%. Honduras is 90%. Brazil's 72%. Here's the scary part. You know, it's talking about the European Union. They're now labeling pedophiles as people that just are, attracted to kids. No big deal. The United Kingdom, what percentage do you think believes religion is important? 10%. Hey, what a correlation. Germany, same, 10%. France, 11%. They're doing a little better. Spain, 22%. Greece, 56%. This one kind of caught me off guard. Israel, 36%. I was kind of shocked by that. But I knew that Israel is, for the most part, a secular country. We think of it. We think of the Holy Land. Everybody obviously goes to church or whatever. They don't. It's 36%. Nigeria. Want to take a guess on Nigeria? 88%. When I was a little boy, of course, the Southern Baptists, we are all independent churches, but we pool our money and pay for missionary effort. And, it's a big part of what I grew up. And you go to Bible school, and Bible school is really just designed around supporting the mission effort. And, in my mind, as a little kid growing up, America's, a Christian nation, and the rest of the world's pretty much not, and Africa is definitely, not. And so we need to get over there and help those folks learn about Jesus. In my lifetime, the table turned. I mean, it just flipped. Right now in America, as I speak, about 40% of the country is attending church. In Nigeria, it's 80 to 90% are attending church this morning. They need to send missionaries over here. Is that not crazy? And it happened. It happened in my lifetime. In my lifetime, that has happened. Weekly attendance in church. What state do you think would have the highest? This is from the Gallup poll. What I read earlier was from. Go ahead and give you the details from the Pew Research Center. This is from Gallup. States with the highest weekly attendance. What state do you think has the most people going to church this morning? You're all there. They're all about pretty close to the same. The highest is actually Utah, Mormonism. The second is Mississippi. I kind of have a joke about Mississippi that I probably shouldn't say it, but I'm going to anyhow. Why do Arkansans like people from Mississippi? Because if it wasn't for them, we'd be the dumbest, most inbred people on the planet. But anyhow, and they say that about us too. So, It's fair. It's fair trade. It's a football thing. Is what it's really about. Alabama, same thing goes for Alabama. I've heard the joke both ways for Alabama. Alabama 46%, Louisiana 46%, Arkansas 45%. So really Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, Louisiana, Tennessee. What do we refer to that part of the world? The Bible Belt. So it's not inconceivable that we lead the nation in church attendance, but the numbers are what? Less than half. Less than half of the population. When I was a child, it would have been around 65%. And now it's gone down that much in these few years. Very quickly, and I have so much stuff this morning, I'm not going to be able to get through to all of it, but this is some information I picked up. You can look it up online. It's called Church Answers by Tom Rainer. And he sourced this from a place called the Faith Communities Today, which is abbreviated as FACT, and they've been tabulating data for the last 22 years, since 2000. And most of this information I'm going to give you is related to quarantine. Before the quarantine, the median worship attendance was 65. So we're talking back in 2019, the median church in this country had 65 people show up on Sunday morning. What is it today? 55. So our numbers have dropped pretty consistently. The occupancy rate of worship centers was 33% before the quarantine. And I can vouch for that. I know I was at First Baptist Church, which is where I grew up, going to church in Cherokee. And we were there, Renee and I, not that long ago. Seems like the last time I was home. And yeah, it's a pretty big building. And it was pretty empty. On Sunday morning, and I get it, they have two services, so I was at the late service and the early service, maybe they could, but I don't even think they were at 33% in the building. And I remember when you had trouble finding a seat, when I was younger. Median year that a church was founded was 1950. That's before the pandemic. And that has not changed. So what does that mean? We're not starting any new churches, which is, that's how you have growth, is by beginning new fellowships of believers. The median income, this part did catch me off guard. The median income of churches was $120,000 before the quarantine, and that has not changed. So what that means is the people that were supporting the church, they're the ones that came back. Before, so we didn't lose anything there, but that really didn't change. The percentage of churches with an attendance under 100 before the quarantine was 65%. Today, it's 75%. So our congregations are shrinking consistently. So why is all of this happening? And the other question is has it ever happened before? And the answer is, it's been this way all throughout history. There have been periods of increase and decline. And I'm not going to keep you long, and I might not even get to the text of the day, but you'll just have to forgive me. The Great Plague, any of y'all familiar with that? The Great Plague had a significant impact in the world that you and I live in. I mean a huge impact. We don't even realize how huge of an impact. Number one, just physiologically, it had a gigantic impact on our immune systems. Here's a statistic you probably don't hear much because it has some racial tenets to it, and everything's racial now, and it's anyhow. Africa didn't get hit by the Great Plague. Europe did. Anybody want to take a guess how much of Europe died? Yeah, the estimates range from 1/3 to 1/2. Cities the size of Jonesboro died to the last kid. Could you imagine that? There was not even anybody left around to bury folks. We still find in archaeology pits where they just dug a big hole and just threw everybody in it. I mean, there was just nobody to bury anyone. So that happened in about what? Started in the late 1300s, went through the 1400s, right? When did we have the Protestant Reformation? Right on the heels of it. I mean, well, what happened is the Catholic Church, and I'm not kicking Catholics, but the Catholic Church had become wealthy. It meddled in politics, big, and there's a lot of reasons for that. I'm not kicking them. I mean, they were the only institution still standing after Rome fell, and so obviously they ended up with a lot of authority, whether they intended to have it or not. So a lot of it's not their fault. But they were kingmakers. They were the ones that pulled the strings on a lot of different stuff. By the way, Charlemagne, he's kind of the guy that started limiting the church's authority. I don't know if you know the story. They told him, they said, hey, we'll anoint you as the new Holy Roman Emperor. And when the Pope came to put the crown on Charlemagne's head, what did he do? He reached forward and took the crown, set it on his head himself. And he basically saying, it's fine, you can recognize me, but I don't work for you. You know. And then we'll get to Martin Luther. Martin Luther, who defies the Catholic Church, and he is under the protection of the guy who's supposed to become the next Holy Roman Emperor. And Luther tells him, do you like paying taxes? Do you like paying 20% of everything you get to the church? He's like, no, not really. He's like, good, because you don't have to. He's like, well, what if the Pope excommunicates me and damns my soul to hell? Well, he can't do that. That's between you and Jesus. Oh. Well, I think I might keep you alive. And he did. And so a lot of that falls on the heels of the Great Plague because it just totally reorganized. And we have the period of enlightenment, all of these things, a rise in the middle class. So many people died. So much land was left empty that peasants, slaves, became landowners. You had a surge in middle class after the Great Plague. So it very much reorganized the world. And it reorganized immune systems. AIDS epidemic hit in the 1980s in this country. It was extremely lethal to young black men. And the reason why is that European folks had their immune systems. I mean, the only ones who survived the Great Plague were what? Folks with really robust immune system. And it literally changed our immune systems. There were some genetic mutations. And what they found out is that there were young white men who were sexually active and were exposed to the AIDS virus, but they didn't get it. And the reason they didn't is because their immune system that was given to us by the plague dealt with it. So that it had huge implications on America, our immune systems, on various other things. But what happens, and you see this historically, at the end of the plague, were people morally nicer or were they more morally corrupt? They were more corrupt. Anytime you have a horrible event like that, there's a drop in morality. World War I. Now, you and I don't think of World War I as being that big, and that's because, number one, it's quite a ways away from us, and two, it didn't happen in our country. Now, we sent soldiers and families lost people, but we didn't experience it like Europe experienced it. Europe still refers to World War I as what? The Great War. And man, it reorganized Europe. I mean, kings and queens ended after World War I. That was done. The Tsar of Russia, done. You know, the only kings and queens that survive are like in England, and they're figureheads. I mean, they don't really have any political power anymore. So it very much, and the church, 10% in all of those countries. That is because of World War I. There was a large, and then World War II happened, and you have an even greater drop. And once again, we were part of World War II, but it didn't happen in our backyard. So we didn't hit the decline that they did, and so that's part of the problem. And you will have that occur throughout history numerous times, and it happens in the time of Hosea. So we're in the northern kingdom. We have Hosea, and I'm going to read very quick because I don't have much time. Hear the word of the Lord, you Israelites, because the Lord has a charge to bring against you who live in the land. So it's being set up like a court case, and God is saying, I'm the plaintiff, and I'm bringing a charge against you. He's talking to the northern kingdom of Israel. The Lord has a charge against you. There is no faithfulness, no love, no acknowledgement of God in the land. Did you catch that? There's no faithfulness, no love, no acknowledgement of God in the land. There is only, so when those things go away, what happens? There is only what? Cursing, lying, murder, stealing, and adultery, and they break all bounds. God says it's beyond reckoning. It breaks all bounds. You know, the cursing part, and I work in the trades, and my boss, who I love to death, and I'll work for him as long as he's working and as long as I can work for him, he can't say a sentence without 3 F words in it. Just can't do it. It's the only adjective, adverb that he knows. It's just everything is F this and F that. I mean, he just, it's the craziest thing. And you know what? Every other guy I work with is that way too. Now, I've never picked that up, fortunately. Now, if I hit my thumb with a hammer, I will say something that probably shouldn't be spoken from the pulpit, but I figure we can all grace each other on some of that. We're all, you know, Jesus loves me. It's just not appropriate when you mash your thumbnail off. But these guys, conversationally, it's horrible. And part of it's because of the culture they've grown up in. We've, you know, used to. I remember when I was a little boy, especially in like Hardy or Ash Flat, you're in a restaurant, somebody come in there and dropped an F-bomb, it'd be 3 people stand up and confront you pretty quick about that. We don't do that anymore, do we? Because we'd be in a fight all the time if we did. Everybody does it. It's unfortunate. There's only cursing, lying, murder, and stealing and adultery. They break all bonds. State of California, not too long ago, I worked out there this year for 2 months. Lord, I hope I never have to go back. I've never seen anything like that in my life. You can literally see Western civilization crumbling. And I'm not kidding. I'm not trying to be political or anything. If I went to the gas station, if I went to the store, if I went anywhere, somebody walked up to me and asked me for $20. There are people living in tents everywhere. There were needles. There was drug. Everywhere I went, you could smell marijuana. I was afraid I was going to fail a company drug test just because of the hotel I was staying at, you know. You're huffing it in the air all the time. Smell of pot everywhere. It was insane. There's only cursing, lying, and murder, stealing. They break all bonds. And bloodshed follows bloodshed. Did you catch what that means? Bloodshed follows bloodshed. One bad act follows another. Back in the 1980s and 90s in New York City was worse than it is now. Rudy Giuliani came in and he said, I have a strategy for fixing this. You guys are going after the top end. It starts at the bottom end. If you want a good teenager that doesn't curse you and question you and give you all kind of problems, you know how you deal with that? Start when they're 2. When they're 2 or 3 years old, if they whine and cry and pitch a fit and you go ahead and buy them what they want, you are in trouble. That's going to just keep on happening now. You fix problems before they start. You have a good horse, you probably have a good horse because you headed those problems off at the pass. You don't allow them to build up. And so when you do that, so Rudy Giuliani came up with what? Broken windows policy. we'll go after the small things and the big things will take care of themselves. And that's exactly what happened. He dropped the murder rate and crime rate. We're doing the exact opposite now. State of California says, how much can you steal before they'll prosecute you? Anybody? $1,000. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to lose $1,000 today. But in California, you can walk in a store, walk out with $1,000 of merchandise, and I promise you the retailers that I talked to said the police will not even show up. And so when you do that, bad things are going to follow. Bloodshed follows bloodshed. And this is what God says, because of this the land mourns. Yes, it does, doesn't it? We're feeling it, aren't we? Because of this the land mourns. And all who live in it waste away. The beasts of the field and the birds of the air and even the fish in the sea are dying. God's saying this evil is becoming pervasive. And let no man bring a charge, and let no man accuse another, for your people are like those who bring charges against the priests. You stumble day and night, and the prophets stumble with you. Boy, here's another part we need to kick on. The prophets stumble with you. Did you catch that? God says even the religious leadership is corrupt and immoral. Was it 2-3 months ago? We had a high-profile preacher in New York who got robbed on Sunday morning. Did you hear about that? How much jewelry did they get off of him? $1 million worth of jewelry. Now here's two problems. Number one, what's a preacher doing wearing $1 million worth of jewelry? Now I'm just going to be honest with you. You know, a man needs to earn his wages. And there are a lot of pastors. I had a pastor friend that died here recently. And I don't think he had too much in this world because all he ever did was preach. And that's usually how it is. You know, there are a lot of preachers that are barely getting by. And the bad thing is, in Southern Baptists, you're self-employed. So you're paying taxes yourself. You don't work for the denomination, you work for yourself. Each Baptist church is independent and autonomous. And so you have to pay self-employment taxes, which means probably don't have a big retirement fund. If you get laid off, there's not going to be any unemployment wages. You see what I'm saying? That's how most of them live. You got $1 million in jewelry, you're stealing from the church. You're stealing from people. You're stealing from folks who need it. That's ungodly. I'm not even going to stay on that any longer. But and now they're saying that might have been a whole setup, and he's also been busted for tax evasion. Hey, that's amazing, huh? That he would, yeah, goodness. You stumble by day and night, and the prophets stumble with you. One of the problems that we have in America is that the men who stand behind this desk have failed at their job. And we need to look at ourselves who have done that and say, where have we gone wrong? We can't, preachers can't get together on Monday morning and gripe about their congregation no more than parents can get together and gripe about their kids because you raised them. And when pastors are whining and crying about their congregations are immoral and ungodly, well, you're their teacher. We've failed you. And that's the truth. In the 80s and the 90s, you've seen televangelist after televangelist after televangelist. You got caught the two things that catch all of them. Adultery and money. Gets them all. Old as the Bible. Not a new thing. Let no man bring a charge. You'd stumble day and night. And so God says, I will destroy your mother. He's talking about Israel, the nation. And my people are destroyed from a lack of knowledge because you have rejected knowledge. I also reject you. We can go down the road if we want that the European Union has gone. Europe as a culture had some bad things happen to them. World War I, World War II, other things. And as a result, they turned away from God. And now they're to the point that they can't even recognize evil in their midst. And we're catching up to them, folks. We're catching up to them as a culture. We're catching up to them as a church. And it really is time for us to start calling evil out for evil. And there's time for us, and this is going to be tough. And I don't know how we're going to get away with it, but there's a lot of pastors. Somebody needs to point a finger in their face and tell them you need to give up. You need to give up your job. You need to stop. I resigned my credentials almost 20 years ago. And I'm not going to go into it, but I don't feel like I am worthy of carrying that mantle. And I willingly gave my credentials back to the church. There are a bunch of other men that need to do that. Now, that doesn't mean you can't. I'm here this morning talking to you. It doesn't mean you can't serve in the ministry in some capacity. But what it does mean is that there are a lot of men out there who they just need to find another job. That's all there is to it. And we as a congregation are probably going to have to police some of that. And I'm not talking about your church. I'm talking about the church as a whole. You know, by the way, there's more folks here this morning when your preacher is gone than there is statistically in what I read in these statistics. So y'all are doing pretty good. There's more than 30% here in the building. It's pretty tight in this room. So y'all are doing a great job. But we as a church are going to have to start calling out evil for evil. We're going to have to call it out amongst our leadership, and we're going to have to start calling out amongst our people. We're going to have to do that. And there's a reason. There is one trend that I didn't bring. I had so much stuff. There is another trend, and I like this trend. There are a lot of pastors that are now becoming bivocational, which means they're not just making a living in the ministry. They actually make a living as a teacher or whatever. And the church, you know why that's a good thing? I'm about to tell you why. Because you're free. You're like the Apostle Paul. The Apostle Paul had some controversy one time. And you can read it. I wish I could reference it right now. I can remember what he said, but I can't remember. But he'll tell them, he said, hey, when I was there, I didn't take a dime from you. Paid my own way. So put your pants on. I'm about to chew your tail. You're not going to be able to tell me, hey, can it, preacher boy, because we're paying your salary. Paul tells them up front, you didn't give me a nickel. And I am about to let you hold it. A bivocational pastor can do that. He can crawl up in that pulpit and he can call out some things in his congregation, and if they fire him, he don't have to worry about being homeless. We need that back. We really need that back. We've lost that. And it's just one of those trends that's starting to happen. Now, the reason it's happening is because churches got so small they can't afford to pay the preacher. But actually, it's a good thing. That's a good thing. In closing, can it change? Can it get better? The answer is yeah. You know, there was a time in this country when almost nobody went to church. Did y'all know that? We had something called the Great Awakening. Have you heard of it? You ever heard of John and Charles Wesley? This used to be a Methodist church, didn't it? Yeah. You ever heard of circuit riding preachers? Yeah, there was a time in this country when almost nobody went to church during the frontier days. John Whitfield, who was a contemporary of Wesley, he would show up and preach. And I'm not making this up. Men would, when they heard he was coming to town, they'd go kill a bunch of house cats and set them out in the sun, let them bloat up for a few days. And when Whitfield was preaching, they'd throw them at him. They called them ripened cats. And they would pelt him with dead animals when he was preaching. That happened in this country. in the 1700s. And we went from that to the 1950s where, a large majority of America was going to church. We can turn it around. We're capable of doing that. Let's have a word of prayer. Father, I thank you for today. I thank you for being a father to us, not just a loving and forgiving father, but also one who is not afraid to correct us when we need it. And I pray that we might withstand the correction that's coming, and that you would gather those back up who have kept their faith, and you would keep us going. And Father, we pray for this because we know there are so many that need us to act in their lives and to help them. And I pray that you would bless us and encourage us as we go about fulfilling the Great Commission and telling your love to those around us and those who are not around us and those who are at the very ends of the earth, that you might give us the strength to carry that out. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.